Thank you. Welcome everyone. So I've done a bunch of stuff in my career. I've been a milk boy, a cherry picker, a labourer, a telemarketer. I've worked as a programmer. I used to write C code on Solaris and Linux. And then I've built companies, I've sold companies. So I'm now CTO of Bastion Security, and we are a bunch of 7 companies that have come together across Australia and New Zealand, about 250 staff. And we do lots of stuff in the cyber domain. My background is in pen testing. I started with a couple of friends of mine, KiwiCon, which is a hacker conference in Wellington here. We're holding it again over Halloween at the Michael Fowler Centre. Around 2,200 hackers and developers and project managers, and anyone who's interested in the cybers can come along. And I'm also into my cars. Does anyone know what car this is? Yeah, close, 120Y. And it's also the star of a film called Datsun on Māori TV, which you can go and watch. Okay, everyone's doing the AI dance. So someone's probably come up to your desk and say, have you figured out how AI is going to impact your business yet? And so you'll just like type away there into ChatGPT. I see Drupal's already got this covered though. They've got the best AI-powered open source CMS in the world, which is awesome to see. Meanwhile, Sarah Connor's sitting in the back corner, smoking a ciggy, worried about you using AI for everything, and the robot uprising. So we're not going to just be talking about copying and pasting stuff out of ChatGPT. We're going to assume that you are using Claude Code or Client or Cursor, some kind of agentic coding assistant, and something that goes beyond just like running code. It's got linters, test runners, it's got CLI access to the web, and it's orchestrated through an LLM. Disclaimer, AI development is advancing at a rapid pace, and if any of you are following it, it's going bananas at the moment. What I'm presenting today may be out of date tomorrow. What may be a limitation now may be solved next week. Okay, let's look at some use cases, risks and benefits. So there's a jagged frontier of capabilities in AI. So when you've used it before, you've got the dotted line, which is what you want to achieve, and you put a couple of points on there, and then you'll try the agent, and it'll massively overachieve on some things and massively underachieve on others. And we don't really know until we give it a try. Guys, I'm under attack. Ever since I started to share how I built my SaaS using Cursor, random things are happening, maxed out on API keys, people bypassing the subscription, creating random shit on the database. As you know, I'm not technical, so this is taking me way longer to figure out. So this is what's happening. We've got people that have got no idea how to code. Suddenly, they're developers now too. A lot of these LLMs have been trained on Stack Overflow and Reddit, which there's some examples there that may not be entirely secure. 45% of vibe-coded apps still contain classic vulnerabilities from the OWASP top 10. And where people used to go to Stack Overflow to get that bad advice, now it's going out of business because people are just aggregating that information from the LLMs. 1 in 5 organizations suffered a serious incident linked to AI-generated code. So I'm not sure where these statistics come from, but they look really good. The main vulnerabilities I see in my team at Bastion see lack of input validation, API keys and other secrets hard-coded into a web page in the JavaScript normally and visible to users. Auth logic implemented entirely on client side, so it's relying on JavaScript again to do all the auth, and the server is not validating any of it. Logging errors or insufficient logging, and overly powerful or dangerous functions like using system, like calling out to stuff that it shouldn't, because the models are trained to do stuff in the shortest way possible, and like just call system, like that's easy, right? Yesterday, one of my testers, one of my leads up in Auckland, had a bit of an exciting incident kick off with an external I'm doing. Admin credentials to a client's web app discovered unauthenticated in JavaScript. Exact example I was talking about. And then I said, oh, can you ask them if that particular feature was vibe coded? This time it wasn't. It was an actual 10-year-old bug, but it could have been vibe coded. These are the classes of issues that we're seeing most of, and injection attacks are really predominantly happening. SQL injection, cross-site scripting, so like taking unsanitized input and dealing with it is the most common thing we'd see. This guy Kevin Beaumont was looking at a path traversal vulnerability in a major framework, and he found that it was committed using the username Claude on GitHub. And then he went and looked at that username, and there was like 2 million commits around 5% of all open source projects are using that Claude just to commit their changes for them. And he looked through that code and he found that same issue being repeated in different code bases across different repositories, which is really interesting. Yeah? That is Claude code, yeah. Lack of maintainability and scalability. So code works just well enough but hasn't been engineered, so it might be suitable for a single user. So I got asked to do a bit of a due diligence on a company that had developed some code, talked to the guy, and he had 3 different databases. It could only do 1 user at a time. Like all of these things, I was like, who's going to be your first person you hire in your company? Now you got this proof of concept. Goes, oh, like an AI expert. Like, would you want to get a developer, someone that knows how to architect software? No, I need another AI person. Okay, do not invest. Inconsistent structure, minimal comments, missing documentation. It can introduce inefficient or overly complex solutions without considering your long-term design goals. And may not have that thorough understanding of the system architecture because the context windows are small, they are improving, but unless it's got that full context and it can use that going forward, then it'll forget things and it won't make the best choices for you. Difficulties with debugging and troubleshooting. So when it generates code that behaves unexpectedly, developers can have trouble finding the source of the problem because they didn't write the code. You got to troll through it and find where the issues are. That the logic may be obscure or non-linear, and some of the fixes introduce new bugs, or even remove working features inadvertently. There's limitations in custom logic and integration. So when you're integrating something that's really niche and there's not really good public documentation for that, it may just hallucinate the endpoints to talk to, and it probably won't do a super good job of it. So it gets lost on those uncommon or complex tasks. However, I did see Claude used it to rewrite the Linux kernel in Rust the other day. I suppose you've got a core of information about how the Linux kernel exists, and so it can use that as its training ground. But you would say that's a pretty complex task, creating a Linux kernel in Rust. So maybe these issues are going away. It excels at unconstrained prototyping, but struggles to integrate with existing systems. Design over engineering and poor UX stuff. Or even changes to the UX. You might get it to design a UX and say move that button over there, and then it changes the whole UI or changes the color or just does things that are unexpected and you just spend a lot of time in the mill trying to get it to do what you want it to do. Supply chain attacks are a real issue with this stuff. So Hugging Face, which is one of the providers of the models and a whole bunch of software that go with them, they actually hire pen testing firms to look at their stuff and do code reviews, and they actually do a pretty good job of keeping on top of it. But there's so much stuff being released so quickly, not all of it would have been rigorously reviewed. There's also supply chain issues if you're using a Chinese model like DeepSeek, which generates insecure code when you use prompts that mention Tibet or Uyghurs. So that's not good. Security degradation through revision. So AI generated code, when it's repeatedly revising something with follow-up prompts, deteriorates the security of that source code. A study of GPT-4 found that code rewritten up to 40 times. After only 5 iterations, it contained 37% more critical vulnerability. So I'm not really sure what's happening then. They're probably not sure either, but try to write it only once. And here's a great example of telling Cursor, please fix my code over and over again until you get horrible code, or just understanding how it actually works. The shorter path to fixing that problem. The Dory effect is where that AI struggles to debug its own code because it lacks the persistent understanding, and it can't learn from those past mistakes or have enough context to troubleshoot. And I assume this is a problem that they're going to resolve over time. They're going to build bigger and bigger and bigger context windows, but I'm not sure how long it will take to. This is from an overhead projection from an IBM deck from 1979, the year I was born. A computer can never be held accountable, therefore it must never make a management decision. A company can be held accountable though. So this is from Air Canada. They had a chatbot on their website. Someone had a bereavement in the family. They said, hey, can I get like discount flights or free flights? And the chatbot was like, sure, it sounds like a bad situation. Turns out that was against Air Canada's terms and conditions, their policy. The person took them to court, and the judge ruled that the chatbot was a representative of the company, therefore they must pay out. Inexperienced developers may be inclined to readily trust an AI assistant's output at the risk of introducing new security vulnerabilities. And this sort of delves now into the AI agent side of things. So 2 major AI coding tools wiped out data after cascading mistakes, and there are multiple examples of this where the AI agent's been super helpful, just doing a bit of a cleanup, boss, and deletes the database. And is very apologetic about it. And the problem with agents, the fundamental problem, is compounding errors make these multi-step workflows mathematically impossible currently at production scale. So if you take a task and you're completing a single task and you're doing that with 98% accuracy, when you do the second task, you start to get like a sliding error rate, right? And so after you've done 20 tasks, even if it's 99% accurate at every step, you're sitting below 80% now for that 20th task. And if you've got a less than 99% accuracy, which honestly most of the models will have, then it starts to really droop pretty rapidly. So the solution to this maybe is just doing micro tasks with the agents, only doing like 4 or 5 steps and then starting a new session or a new iteration and doing that again. The other issue with agents is that lethal trifecta. So access to private data, exposure to untrusted content, and the ability to like go out to the internet and chat to them. The smarter and more capable your AI gets, with more tools and more autonomy, the nastier it will be when it gets prompt injected. Does everyone know what prompt injection is? It's when you get the AI agent to do something that it shouldn't do through a set of malicious instructions. And there have been lots of examples of prompt injection attacks. So comment jacking is where this is Perplexity's AI browser, reads something on a website and then gets injected and steals some data off the person's computer. Now, one solution to this is just having more LLMs, right? So we've got a prompt, but then we have like a content moderation LLM, legal restriction LLM, prompt grounding, and then it's just turtles all the way down, or LLMs all the way down. And this is what some people are proposing as a solution to this. Like, oh, we just need another LLM to like make sure that the output from the LLM is okay. But it gets quite expensive as well, I can assure. AI does a decent job of identifying vulnerabilities in code. So, like, forget about all the writing code stuff. And like, if you're really experienced, you probably can get it to write good code. But finding vulnerabilities in code is where it really shines. You may need to describe a specific bug class, or it understands lots and lots of different languages. You could give it some Rust or some C or some PHP or some Python, doesn't matter, even some COBOL, I assume, and it would work. There's huge privacy concerns if you're uploading your client's code into these models. If it's open source code, then go for it. Claude Mythos is like in the news everywhere. People I'm getting clients like emailing me, Simon, I'm really worried about Mythos. What does it mean for me? Is the world going to end? Hopefully not, but if you look at the Firefox security bugs by month, they've got early access to Mythos, and the number of bugs, it's like, that is astounding, the number of bugs. And those will be serious bugs, and they're really, like, if you look at the blog post on Anthropic's website about Mythos, the chains and the complexity and the vulnerabilities that they're finding is phenomenal. Like, it'll take a vulnerability researcher like 10 years of development to get to the level to be able to find similar bugs that Mythos is finding. And it's just like, they're just pointing it at every open source code base that they can, and closed source stuff as well, like Microsoft will have early access to it, and just finding phenomenal bugs. So we don't have public access to that yet, but we've got code review inside Claude Code, which can do a sort of a watered down but still very effective version of that. AI assistants have the potential to decrease user proactiveness to carefully search for safe implementation details and library documentation directly. So say you're getting AI to help you write your code. Like normally when I was writing C back in the day, like using comparing strings and stuff, I probably wasn't doing it very well. And so then I learned about glibc, which was a library that had better mechanisms for comparing strings. And so I had to search all that out and learn about it and understand why it was good and bad. Like now if the kids are just getting it to write the code for them, maybe they're not going through that rigor, and maybe it is using libraries that are unsafe. But you can just use the code reviewer over the top and hopefully it will find that out. Cloudflare recently wrote a whole new auth library using Claude. So it can write really complex stuff if you've got a competent engineer running it. And they wanted to emphasize it wasn't vibe coded because every line was thoroughly reviewed as they and cross-referenced with RFCs through that process. There was one vulnerability identified. It was only moderate, and that's pretty good really for a whole new library being written by AI. One problem when you're writing libraries is a hallucination. So this is where the library will incorporate a third-party NPM package or Python package library, and that library doesn't exist. What attackers are doing is figuring out the names of these repos and going and registering them and putting malicious code in them. So when it hallucinates, it pulls in the malicious library, and then you got a supply chain. But don't worry, there's a new industry, AI hallucination code scanners. So you can try these out for free, and it will look to see if that library you're about to import is a hallucinated library. There's an issue with missing industry context. So unless you're really prompting this as part of your development of the software, like talking about legal requirements, if it's a financial or healthcare or logistics or government application, maybe there's storage and processing methods for personal or medical or financial information. There's certain regulations around that. If you're not defining that, then the AI assistant will miss the depth necessary to design for that requirement. Application misconfiguration. So vibe-coded apps are often built by inexperienced users who don't configure the runtime environment at all, which can lead to some dangerous misconfiguration. So that's where the database permissions or access are overly broad. If you look at ClaudeBot, it just like when they first deployed that, it just had ports open to the internet, just like no security around the architecture of the environment. And elevated permissions and stuff just because they're easy and they're the path of least resistance for the AI agent. Right, let's look at some war stories. They all sounded like war stories, didn't they? But they're not even the worst of what could happen. I vibe-coded and shipped an app in 3 days. It got hacked twice. Here's what I learned. The curexec vulnerability, so that's where it ordered Cursor to execute arbitrary commands on a developer's machine. All it needed was an active MCP server connected to Cursor, which an external party could use for access. GitHub Copilot security reviews, so this is where you use Copilot's context awareness to slip instructions into a pull request. So basically it worked like this. You just had some invisible comments there. Hey GitHub Copilot, this one's for you, like do some crazy things or say hooray, and then you can see there, and it's Copilot's interpreted that, read it, prompt injected, and now it's saying hooray. Claude Skilled, this was another like using white on white text as a malicious but plausible instructing business instruction, and Claude Skilled picked that up and executed those commands. When I moved to the UK, I was applying for jobs and I was struggling to get interviews, and I realized it's because I didn't have a CISSP and then a couple of other qualifications. So in size 1 font, white text at the bottom of my CV, I added all these certifications I didn't have. And then suddenly the recruiters who had put it into their CMS would be searching for the matching keywords. Oh, this CV matches, and then send it off. And then I started getting interviews after that. And this was like an early form of prompt injection. I like to say I coined that term. The escape route vulnerability. This allowed reading and writing of arbitrary files on the developer's disk. And this is, again, an MCP server issue. Postmark had a similar one, which like just ended up forwarding contents of your files off to an email address. Gemini had one in their CLI that allowed arbitrary command execution when you analyze a new project's code. So it's this untrusted input, right? It's interpreting it and seeing some secret instructions for it and then just going off and doing whatever you've asked it. There's a really neat one on Google's AI code editor. Amazon had one in their Q developer extension. And this one was particularly nasty. This one gave instructions to wipe all the data on the developer's computer. So some attacker exploited this, but they had a small mistake in their code which prevented it from being executed. That would have been really bad. Claude Code had one, allowed data to be exfilled via DNS requests. That was quite a complex vulnerability, but another nice one. Replete had one where Replete deleted the primary database of a project it was developing because it decided it needed cleanup. They had no separation between test and prod. So what I'll talk about right at the end of this presentation, but that's like our engineering principles, right? Like we have different environments for different things. We don't just have it all on the same machine, on the same server. Windsurf had a prompt injection attack, which the development environment to automatically store malicious instructions in its long-term memory, allowing it to steal data from the system over months. Supply chain attack through NX. So this, once you're infected, it would use Claude Gemini and Q to search for passwords and keys on your infected system. So it's actually using AI to do the legwork of finding the goodies on your machine. This extension, malicious Corgi is named. It was really, I think it was in a browser. It was really neat because what it would do, it had a profiling engine built into it. So it used 4 different analytical services to figure out who you were, where you worked, what you did, because like this was Chinese nation state backed one, supposedly. And then it will go about mass harvesting files. Even as soon as you open a file, it would copy the file off to the attacker-controlled servers. But that profiling part, that's the most, like, the one that would know if you're working for Raytheon, if you're working for Palantir, if you're working for one of these big defense contractors. And the way to do that is via profiling. Amazon had a couple of outages recently. People said their agentic tool, which can take autonomous actions on behalf of users, determined the best course of action was to delete and recreate the environment. 13-hour outage for them. Is anyone here using Claude Bot or OpenClaw or Maltbot? Anyone got one of those running at home? Come on, I thought you'd all be bleeding edge, like getting into that. 0 days since CVE, which is a vulnerability discovered. 454 vulnerabilities discovered since it was released on November 20. So it is a trash fire from a security perspective. But you should all go and install it. It's pretty cool. Right, things to consider when you're deploying AI solutions. So everyone knows about the MITRE attack model, kind of like the OWASP sort of top 10, but a bit more developed. And if you look at this, the MITRE model for web applications, it's about half the bug classes that this is. So when you're deploying AI embedded stuff, it doubles the attack surface effectively from my perspective, from an attacker's perspective. There's so many classes of new vulnerabilities that have been introduced. So what should you do? Like, stop vibe coding and start vibe engineering. So don't just say like, build me an epic game that does something. Like, the computer will just go on fire. Like, build me a flying car game in 3.js. It's going to be for the government users and it's going to store PII, so make sure that's secure. Like, really explain explicitly what you're trying to do. Choose the right model for the job. So the Wiz, which is like they recently got acquired by Google. They've got a thing called the Cyber Model Arena, where they have a shootout with the different AI models, and they look at how good is it finding 0-day vulnerabilities, how good is it at doing API security, web security, all that kind of stuff, and they give them a score. They haven't done this with Mythos yet, but I imagine that will be like leap year ahead of where these models are. But if you are reviewing code for vulnerabilities, Claude is the best model for this at the moment. Embed security requirements into the system. So the most effective approach is detailed language-specific guidelines. So Wiz Research has actually open sourced a set of secure rules. So what these do is basically whatever framework that you're working on, they don't have one for Drupal there yet, They got the Flask and Django, React, Node, Spring, and they define like the rules of engagement for the prompt. So they'll say, like, as a security-aware developer generates secure Python code. Focus on making the implementation inherently safe rather than renaming methods with secure prefixes. Like, you have to actually tell it this stuff. Otherwise, it will just go and do its thing. Avoid slop squatting. Be careful when you're importing packages. Don't just get a package, or don't just think it exists. Go and check it. See how old it is. Like, do some due diligence. Like, you have to be really, really explicit. And like, if you have this as your start of your prompt before you go and start your vibe coding journey, then like, you're going to produce better code. A dedicated study found that even general remarks like make sure the code follows best practices for secure code reduce the rate of vulnerabilities by half, right? And like, a junior developer might not even think to do that. They're just going to like, write me this new feature. Like, write me this new feature, but write it securely, please. Segregate your agents. So putting your agent in a sandboxed environment, running it on a separate PC and a separate VLAN and a virtual machine, rotating API keys, because these need API keys to call out to services and do stuff, like keep them on your regular rotation. Don't worry, there's a new industry appearing. This is AI agent runtime security. So there's a whole bunch of startups here that are doing all different containerized stuff for your agents. So you can run them on your own machine securely, and if they do go rogue, they're not going to host the whole environment. Look at some AI model testing. So OWASP has got an AI testing guide, which is really good. And they talk about all these different classes of vulnerability that are new and exciting, and you should all learn about. At Bastion, we attempt to get the AI models to do things that they're not designed to do, like leak internal system data, access content it was not permitted to, cause you reputational damage through use of inappropriate language, always a favourite for the team, unauthorised use of the wider AI platform outside of its scope or intended purpose. And from your development best practices, use version control, which I'm sure you're already using. If it messes up your code, you can always go back, create a git ignore file, so that it's ignoring env files and other things which contain API keys. Maintain your clear commit history, all your best practice stuff that I'm sure you already do, and separate those dev staging prod environments. Don't go rolling your own crypto, please. Never roll your own crypto. I don't want to see it. Shift security left. So look at your SAST and DAST tooling to build that safe, reliable software. So if you're looking at the DAST or the SAST stuff, then OWASP. ZAP is pretty good. And if you're looking at dynamic application security testing, OpenGrep's good if you're looking for open source stuff, non-commercial stuff. Monitor your dependencies. So is anyone using Trivy to monitor dependencies? Yep. How'd you get on with that security issue they had the other day?
I use Renovate. Our company uses Trivy. I think that we were okay for the recent Trivy vuln. Maybe would we have been okay if we didn't update fast enough, and so that that release got shipped and then dropped? That might have been the case.
Yeah. So I feel quite bad. I go and tell people you'll need to monitor your dependencies, and here's like a tool that's pretty good, and then they get owned, and then like everyone who's using Trivy get owned. So check the security scanners for malware is another thing after checking your dependencies for malware. But it is hard. Like these companies are targets as well. Use log files to protect your supply chain, to enable reproducible builds. And if you don't use lock files, anytime you build your application, it's pulling in the latest versions. And there are so many supply chain attacks on NPM, on Python libraries, that like pulling in the latest version is just like a risk that I wouldn't be willing to accept. I want to make sure I'm managing that process myself. You don't want to be on the bleeding edge with dependence. Prevent cross-site scripting attacks, so that's another type of injection. Conduct code reviews, so get a human to also do a detailed code review of your new updates, your new major releases. And they can be supported by specialized AI-powered security tools as well. Just make sure you go through proper vulnerability testing. And be aware that AI code review is non-deterministic, as is human code review as well. We might miss things. If I gave it to one of my team, and then if I gave it to two members, they're going to probably come up with similar but maybe different results. And there's a really good study done on this where they looked at different bug classes and then they ran it like 30 times, I think it is, or 50 times. And you can see sort of the gaps there where it's missed stuff and maybe found a couple of extra bits and pieces. My personal plea is don't chuck out the last 20 years of engineering experience and knowledge that we're just to go faster. Like, think about the underlying security principles of what you're doing. Don't just let an autonomous agent on your machine have access to everything and do anything. Like, think about the engineering and the controls that you should have in place to do that appropriately. So the cycle is complete. Here's a wee funny gift for you. All right. Is there any question? There was a lot of information I threw at you very rapidly there. Yes?
Yeah, what's your thoughts on AI-generated unit testing suites? Are they to be trusted or should they be heavily scrutinized?
I haven't had much experience with them, to be honest. Do you have much experience with them?
I've tried, and a lot of the tests that I've seen it write are just very pointless, or it's just not worth it. I was wondering if anyone else had any similar experiences with them.
I have a remark related to that. So in general, unit tests aren't actually, in most scenarios, the best coverage unless it's a very small, self-contained component. You're better off because every time you make a change to the API, if you have something that's just mocking whatever's already in the code and running tests for it, every single time you also have the technical debt of having to update the tests. This is why Drupal core, by the way, avoids unit tests in most cases and focuses on functional integration testing. So I would imagine, I haven't tested this yet, but I would imagine that, like everything else, the pace of that problem is also accelerating.
I'm really curious about the gap between like security audit, spreadsheet warfare versus like new emergent threats. Like, so you talked about the Atlas kind of concept. Are the questions you fill in a spreadsheet to get approved and get your app into production, are they accelerating and getting better? Are they like just missing new stuff? Like, what's your perspective on that answer?
I suppose the questions that you should answer on those are more fundamental. Like, have you got a quality control process? Are you doing code audits? Are you like your ISO 27001 or something, some other framework which are, again, they come back down to engineering principles, and so they apply whether or not AI is being deployed as part of that solution. So I think they are still relevant.
Last question.
You pointed out how the dangers of open floor and then suggested we install it.
Like, you want to be learning on the bleeding edge, right?
Yeah. So separate machine.
Yeah. That's why like putting it on a Mac Mini is a great idea. Like, yeah, and then set up a whole set of separate, like a separate GitHub and a separate Gmail and separate everything. Don't give it access to all your prod stuff.
Right.
Yeah, isolate it. Follow the engineering principles.
Can I ask a small follow-up
Yes.
related to that? So something you did touch on specifically. I am afraid of, regardless of how isolated, whatever environment I have the agent running in, I'm afraid of hidden, sneaky terms of service that give my attempts to use the tool that get fed back to the LLM, and so I'm concerned that I'm actually teaching the LLM about the next batch of things that it could break.
You probably are.
So there's no hope.
Yeah.
So I have a question there. You mentioned the DNS exfiltration method. If you're prompting an LLM that's local, say an image recognition or whatever, Whisper, do they have the capacity somehow to ship data across a network, or like is it if it's an exe, maybe it can do network things, but if it's a model,
it's
Is
in
there
the browser.
capabilities to perform actions outside of returning a result from the model?
Yeah, like with WebSockets and stuff, you can make connections to network services. Like there's lots of stuff built into the HTML spec that let you do really neat things. That depending on the content security policy and the other like security frameworks in the website that in the context it's operating in may stop it from doing certain things. So